I don't know what to make of all of this because it's happening so quickly. I can't believe the state to which the country is degenerated. I've been in contact with a reliable source within the Canadian military, and he told me today by email that if I had any sense, I'd take my money out of the Canadian banks because the situation is far worse than I've been informed. And so that's just one of many such messages I receive on a daily basis. So let's talk about the banks. So here's what our Prime Minister did last week. He permanently destroyed 20% of the population's faith in the entire Canadian banking system and stained the Canadian banking system's international reputation, I would say, for decades. And in any normal time, that in itself would have been enough to constitute sufficient grounds for a non-confidence vote for the government to be ousted. And that's only one of like the 7 things that happened last week that are of that magnitude. You can't even keep up with them. So imagine that you're on the side of Trudeau and the Trudeau government, and you're trying to make the case that this is an emergency that justifies the imposition of martial law. So what's the emergency exactly? Tell me, give me some evidence that there's an emergency of any sort.
Even if, and I accept the challenge to be a devil's advocate, let me really try. What is the thing that is making the Canadian state tremble to the point of its own dissolution? Are all the provincial capitals under seizure? No, I don't think so. Oh, I got it. The Russians are coming down from the north, and they've got a fleet of the highest gunnery, and no, it's not that either. Maybe it's inflation, and if we kill the truckers, we ruin the truckers, we can take. Look, even trying to be advocate. Okay, great imposition. I'll go that far. Great imposition on the kind of comfort and tranquility of Ottawa, but there's been an awful lot of imposition on the tranquilities of every person in this country. Where's the threat? There isn't one. This was just the longest, most sustained, and almost, you can read it and you can see the live pictures from people who are not in the news media. It was even an almost celebratory thing. If even a delegation of the Trudeau cabinet had walked down the streets of Ottawa, had enough of parkers that they could sit outdoors and spend 2 hours talking to some of these real people, this could have been washed away. So even advocatus diabolus, I cannot do it because I cannot even in fantasy come up with reasons.
Well, let me try. So let's say, all right, so this is it's a radical right-wing movement, and it's funded by MAGA, money flowing in from the United States, and that there's a real threat of a January 6th style insurrection, and as a consequence, to protect Ottawa and the stability of the state, we have to make the trucker convoy illegal. And then we have to hunt everyone down and track everyone down, whoever donated, because they're part of this extreme far-right network that has its origins in the United States, and the entire integrity of the state is no. Well, so does anyone believe that? It's like, so, because I don't get it. I don't even see why this is a wise move strategically for the Liberals.
Well, I tell you, there is a reason why they believe it, because this is why I brought up the United States. It wasn't idle. They had a sustained 4 years of believing what was not true. I'm stating this with definitive force. It simply wasn't true. Putin did not own Trump. Now, people might not like to hear that, but it was a confection. It was a setup. And yet all of the great investigative powers of some of the greatest journals and television stations in all the world went with it day and night.
I can't think of any other reason than belief in something like that could possibly justify what's happening, because I can't believe that. So I'm trying to look for alternative explanations, So, okay, the Liberal government has decided to implement a state of emergency. Okay, so here's a psychological explanation. Trudeau's father did that back in the 1970s, and Justin is constantly trying to prove his validity as a figure of masculine integrity. And I think think there's probably some of that going on, because if there wasn't, he wouldn't have run for prime minister to begin with, because he's so supremely unqualified to be prime minister that it's a complete bloody miracle that anyone could be narcissistic enough to assume that with that little knowledge, a role like that should be adopted. So that's definitely a factor. And so he's got to stand up and show that he can do it under duress. And then it's got to be the belief that there's something like a far-right conspiracy occurring, because invoking the Martial Law Act, the Emergency Act, is so preposterous a move that unless you actually believe that there was a signal threat of that paranoid sort, there's no way you could justify it strategically, because I cannot see how anyone could think through, including Chrystia Freeland, by the way, the notion that this is going to go over well over a period of something approximating a month. So it's got to be that, and I read the other day that because FinTrack never found any evidence of, radical foreigners colluding in a right-wing manner to fund the Freedom Convoy, that most of the information that the government depended on was actually generated by the CBC. And so then we have this feedback loop, right? Well, there's that, yeah, and that's a whole other bloody insane catastrophe, that funding site was hacked by a crazy activist, and then that information was distributed, and that distribution of stolen information is technically illegal, and the media jumped on that, and the government capitalized on it, and it's got to be that they believe their own press.